harsh treatment from both the federal and provincial governments because you refuse to do so. But the thing about it is it makes you so much stronger in terms of a legal position, in terms of a negotiating position, because everything stems from your sovereignty as opposed to a right. Because the fundamental difference between what Canada's offering and what Manitoba has always said is Manitoba is about, recognition of powers, because that's what sovereignty is. Canada's offering some rights, and rights are under another sovereign. The right to be consulted, citizens have a right to be consulted. But the power of sovereignty is something outside of their constitution. And I think we just need to shift the negotiating tables more in the direction of recognition of power versus recognition of a set list of rights. Because as sovereigns, we can take care of our own, and Canada has legal obligations to us as sovereign nations versus as citizens with some rights. And the other thing I would say about sovereignty is that no matter what we think about it, how we debate it, how we want to infuse it into everything we do, my best advice would be make it always about your own native laws, your own concepts, your own traditions, your own practices. Never, ever, ever rely on Canada's laws or Canada's recognition offerings as how you will go about strengthening your sovereignty and nationhood. Because everything we are and everything we know and every protection we ever need has always been in our laws. But everything bad that has ever happened has come out of Canada's laws, has come out of European laws. And we know that the very foundation of Crown relations, or so-called nation-to-nation relations with Canada and First Nations, is based entirely on what's in their interest. And it doesn't matter who's in government. It could be NDP, Conservative, Liberal, it could be, whatever the provincial parties are at the time. It's not about politics. We think it's about politics, but it's not. The Crown is the Crown is the Crown. According to their own law, the Crown is indivisible. And they all share a core interest, which is acquiring our lands and resources and governing over our territory. That is 100% inconsistent with our sovereignty as nations. So we have a choice. How do we go about these relations? Do we just believe because we want to believe that we've found yet a new government who's making new promises and everything's going to be okay, knowing that it's not? Or do we say, okay, we need to go on a different path. We need to withdraw from processes that aren't working for us or that don't boost up our sovereignty or at least protect our sovereignty, and try to negotiate a different relationship with the Crown, inside or outside the Constitution, so long as it doesn't impact our sovereignty. And because this picture is about manifest destiny and how this was, all in the best interests of Europeans acquiring our lands. That's why they worked so hard to scalp us, to starve us, to beat us into submission, even just to sign some of these treaties. And we keep waiting for a just settlement, that maybe it's the next guy, maybe it's the next leader that's going to make everything different. But if we actually look at the politics as a whole, from the time of contact to now, even though there's been different political parties, all they do is trade places. In one era, it's the Liberal Party that's being the bad guys, and then the Conservatives come in and they look like the good guys. All of their policies behind the scenes stay exactly the same, just changes a little bit on the surface. And then in another era, the Conservatives are the bad guys, and boy, we just had some really bad ones for 10 years. And then the Liberals come in, and they're like, oh, those Conservatives were so bad, these Liberals look so great. But all of the policies behind the scenes are the exact same. So I always say, we need to look at Crown relations not in the sense of blind faith or what our natural inclination with all of our traditions and customs is to, we reach out our hands in good faith. We constantly do that. But to blindly trust people that we know are not in it for our best interest doesn't help us moving forward when we're talking about protecting our nation within sovereignty. So, do we put our faith in our sovereignty and what's got us here, or do we put it in the benevolence of the crown? That somehow we believe, because they hire enough of our aunts and our friends and our cousins, that they are going to work in our best interest. Because it's not that bureaucracy that makes all of those big policy decisions. It's the people at the top. And a UN study on treaties said, if we're going to really, really look at this whole crown relationship, be it through treaties or other agreements or any arrangements that we have with the crown, we have to do it with our eyes open and to understand that European law is an instrument of colonization. In fact, they created laws after the fact to try to justify all of the things that they were doing on our territories. For example, the doctrine of discovery. Some court in the U.S. says, jeepers, how do I reconcile the fact that, the natives here are sovereign, but then these states and, federal government want to assume sovereignty? Well, let's just make up this law that says the title of native lands goes to anyone who discovers it, as long as it's a European country. Which is fundamentally inconsistent with European law on sovereignty and the fact that they recognized us as sovereign nations. So one sovereign can't just assume sovereignty over another territory. But they twist their laws after the fact to try to make it fit. Or the doctrine of terra nullius. Really, they're going to say that nobody lived here? You don't make treaties with sovereign nations if they in fact don't exist. So the problem has never been about our laws or our side of the negotiating table. It's always been about theirs, and they consistently update and change their policies and even their terminology to throw us off at the negotiating tables. And we also have to think about, from the beginning, this was always about their best interest, because Canada and some of the provinces will have no problem going into the media and saying proudly, we are all treaty people, and we have this wonderful treaty relationship. But how hard have they worked to actually educate people on some of the atrocities and massive human rights violations that were committed to force people to sign treaties that they didn't even know what they were signing? So some of the research I did for my master's was actually, what are some of the things that Europeans were noting about treaty negotiations? So to make it completely outside of us, not our elder stories, but just what were the Europeans saying? And some of the people that were there writing back home to the governors were saying, what Native people are doing here in defending their territories, it's not about ambition or empire like Europeans. It's just to defend their territories. And in fact, all of the injuries that the Europeans have imposed upon Native people have been about divesting them of their land by fraud. First making them drunk, and then making them sign what they knew not what. There is thousands and thousands and thousands of pages of letters and treaty negotiation minutes and everything that will show that the agreements that we made in person, the spirit and intent, the things that we talked about, the things we negotiated, the things we passed tobacco for, the things that we went in ceremony for, are not what they put down on paper. And according to Canadian law, because Canadians hold the pen on what went into the treaties, the courts are supposed to look at those treaties and give us a large liberal interpretation because of this difference in language. But we haven't seen that. What we've seen is the Canadian courts actually uphold some of the worst parts of the treaty provisions. Some of the other letters said it wasn't just about fraud. but in fact, European inhumanity to treaty negotiators. They would cheat them, abuse them, beat them, sometimes to the loss of limbs, set dogs upon them, and all the while this was happening, while people were being beaten into submission, you have a scenario where one part of the treaty was being written in one sense, in a completely different sense than what was being told to the native negotiators by the express orders of the governors. So they were specifically told, it wasn't a mistake, it wasn't cultural miscommunication, we don't understand what's going on here. It was a matter of, listen, tell the Indians their sovereignty and territories intact.